Okay, let's get back on the record. We only have 1 hour left, right?
Yep. Christmas party Friday through Sunday. I'm like in there. Oh, like not while I'm building this
Oh,
house.
where did he go? Mr. Prince, you're continuing?
I gave it back to you.
Let's see how much more he has of Sherlock, because maybe he can leave if he's got a.
He said he had 15 minutes. Mr. Prince, did you say you have 15 more minutes approximately for this witness?
I'm guessing.
Okay, so, and then, Mr. Kaplan, you have no further witnesses?
I do not.
So then, Mr. Prince or Mr. Orlando, what is your plan? Do you have somebody here you want to call?
I believe Mr. Prince is going to call Mr. Heinrich, is my understanding.
Okay,
Yeah, I mean, he's here, so rather than see him come back, I'll try and, as long as I keep up. Sharon, when you were asked by Mr. Orlando about 350-24B2,
B2, yes, okay. I have it.
I understand you felt that it wasn't relevant, but you also said that you had to seek a waiver because if you attempted to comply, it would require you to redesign the plan. You recall saying that?
This is the four-step process?
that's correct. It's paragraph 7 of the letter, of B7.
Would you remind me what I said, please?
You said that if you weren't seeking the waiver and you had to comply with that provision, that you would have to redesign the plan.
Yes, this is in terms of recreational space.
Okay.
I think it was on my direct, Mark had asked me.
You could redesign it, however, correct? Let me put it to you this way, you're hesitating. Is there anything physically on the property that would prevent you from redesigning it?
Redesigning it is what?
Is there anything physically on the Waters property, a physical obstruction, a physical impediment that would prevent you from redesigning the plan?
Redesigning the plan to do what?
Well, for instance,
To provide
to satisfy, sure,
To provide recreational
Yeah.
space? No, but there's one thing that I'd like to add. If we were to do that, section 350, and I'm gonna read it from it, okay? 350, B as in boy, and I'm gonna read section 3A. It says, except where the Board of Supervisors, at its sole discretion, waive the provision of this subsection, and this subsection being related to the recreational space, all proposed non-residential subdivision and land development shall provide recreational lands and/or fee in lieu thereof in accordance with the term herein. Subsection 3B actually further states, aside from the provision of the trail corridor in accordance with subsection C, the township's general policy shall be to require a fee in lieu of on-site recreational lands for non-residential development, with such fees designated to create, expand, and improve community park facilities within East Brandywine Township. Clearly, the code is geared towards not to provide recreational space within commercial facilities and to collect fee in lieu of, such that monies could be used to create, expand, and improve community park facilities elsewhere in the township. So physically, you are asking me a question, can it be done? Yes, it could be done, but it would require redesign. But are we then going against the intent of the code? Yes, that is true as well.
in your opinion.
That is my opinion.
Turning to 350-54B,
What section was that?
is the section on this.
54.
No, is the section about this.
Okay, I have 54B, okay, I have it,
You have that?
yes.
Now, as I understood your answer to Mr. Orlando, your impediment is twofold. Your
Mr. Prince,
impediment,
can you speak up?
Or get closer to the
Yeah,
mic.
it's very hard to hear you.
as I understand your objection in answer to Mr. Orlando, your problem is the impediment caused by two things. A, the location of the road as drawn, and B, the fact that the boundary line, if you will, of the township's take along that road on the west side, and that's this side, does not allow for it. Is that a good synopsis of your position?
Yes, partially that is correct.
If, we're speaking hypothetically again, let's go back to our Quail Hill Road. If the road came off a Quail Hill Road, you would have plenty of room on the left side between the road design and the boundary of the township's condemned property to satisfy that requirement, wouldn't you?
I can tell you without engineering it. Here's the
Okay.
reason why. Because,
I'll accept the answer. I'm
He
not
has the
trying to,
right to explain his
Let me-
answer.
certainly he
so
has
you
a right.
get the perspective, and I'm just trying to make sure that you understand what problems this arrangement that you're proposing creates. If you just run a road like that,
And can't we go back to the exhibit that you marked up? We specifically had you mark up in red that,
yeah,
Right.
I guess we could, but I'm making a very quick point here.
Okay.
What I'm trying to say is that just moving the road here simply doesn't just solve the problem. And to say that, well, then now you have enough room to do landscaping, et cetera. What we are then doing is that we have a stormwater problem that we created. Because that new road that you're planning is now going over what is stormwater requirements, or a stormwater facility. So that has to go somewhere. So everything gets moved around.
But
It's-
you're not
it's got-
saying-
It's got implications.
But
is
you're
what I'm
not
trying to get
saying
at.
that those can't be solved by competent engineers, are you?
What I'm saying is that I don't know, any engineer can answer that question without actually engineering it.
So if I were to say to you that I have a competent engineer who will testify to a road that runs from Quail Hill down through this property, through the Carlino property, and eliminates the need for all of those waivers, you're not going to say that's impossible, right?
I'm not gonna say it's possible either.
You're going to wait,
Unless it is engineered, unless a drawing like this is presented,
a drawing
with-
like that,
a
with an official
a
seal
full
and all of that stuff,
full set with the land development reports, plans, then
yes,
that's
maybe.
what it takes to get there.
Okay,
Not
so if
just a
that's what
sketch.
so if that's what it takes to get there, it's not your position here today that you couldn't get there. It really is your position that your client didn't want to spend the money to re-engineer this, and you already had this design. Isn't that true?
Mr. Prince, I think that you're going a little far there.
I'm gonna object to
Yeah.
that's
this.
not what he
That
said.
true?
That's not what he said.
Yeah, move on.
One of the biggest problems I have with this design is 345, 311, A3. This wall. And you actually have proposed a wall along the eastern side of your connector road, don't you?
Yes,
When you designed that wall,
retaining wall, you mean?
retaining wall, when you designed that wall, did you take into account the possibility that water from BVA would come up against that wall and need to go somewhere?
Water from BVA would come up against the wall? The wall is located upstream of BVA. This area is higher than BVA.
Isn't this area here lower? Isn't that area approximately where BVA already has a main drain inlet and water is flowing currently from Carlino to that inlet?
which is, I'm glad you do bring it up.
What sheet are you
I
referring
am,
to, please?
I'm on sheet 9 of 34. And the area that we are talking about, Mr. Prince has a question on, and let me rephrase it if that's correct. The water from BVA is going to go up to the retaining wall. That's your question. Possibly.
My question was, in the design of this retaining wall, did you consider the possibility of the subsurface system on BVA failing and that water needing to go somewhere?
No, but that what you are describing, sir, is not possible. And here's the reason why. If this system fails, the topography of this shopping center is running towards North Guthrie'sville Road. This is higher than there.
Guys, this and this does not come across on a transcript.
I'm sorry. So the BVA's parking field, the front parking field of BVA contains an existing underground stormwater management system. Mr. Prince is asking if in the design of the retaining wall proposed along the southern side of the proposed connector road in between BVA property and the Carlino property, was that wall, was the consideration given to the failure of their existing underground system and a possible water backing out of it and going and impacting the retaining wall? And my answer is that if that system failed, the water will ooze out of the system. When the water oozes out, it will run eastwards towards the existing building in the direction of Guthrie'sville, because that's where the topography of the shopping center is leading to.
So let me ask you, and I'm not an engineer, I'm just a country lawyer. I'm looking at this and I see these marks, and am I right that these marks are elevation levels?
Their contours, yes.
Yeah.
Existing
The
contours,
existing contours, and isn't that 572?
yes.
And isn't the one headed north 571,
Yes,
and then 570,
yes,
and then 569?
yes, sir.
Isn't that water running downhill?
It is going, so the contours, the sequence of contours doesn't dictate how the water goes. The shape of the contour dictates how the water goes.
So
right?
in other words, it would be
So-
the shape of the parking lot, the way it has been surfaced, and whether or
it's the-
not it
it's the-
slopes and how it slopes.
It's the pitch of the parking lot, and in what direction it pitches is where the water is going to go. Just because something is downstream of it doesn't just end up there.
So let me ask you this, just hypothetical, we're just speaking hypothetically. If there is that failure and the water runs towards the store, which is a physical wall, where's the water going to run then? Because I'm looking here and I see what you're saying about the elevations, but aren't these lower? That says 563.
Yes, so I'll
And you
do-
have an inlet here. What's the elevation on that inlet?
can I show you something? sir?
Sure.
See that 566?
I do.
Which is at the front left side of the Croppers building. Where am I pointing? That's 566. To the right side of the building, the Croppers' right side of the building, the front right, meaning front eastern side or southern side, if you will, is elevation 564. Water wants to go from here this way. That's where it's going. That's what I meant when I was trying to explain to you.
I understand what you're saying, but you didn't look at the subsurface system to see how it was designed or where its outflow is, did
I'm
you?
going to object to that question.
I'll withdraw it.
No obligation.
I withdrew it.
Oh, we did.
Yes, he did. You have to listen. Now, I got your point about the wall. I understand your answer. I understood what you said when you said that you can't meet the slope requirement. You can't meet the 4-to-1. What if you move the road west?
I'm going to object. It's over and over and over. We have said that the road has been fixed by the township, and that's what we're stuck with. If he wants to argue to the court that that's not true, let him do it, but it's enough of the same thing over and over again. This is a filibuster.
I would agree. There was a lot of conversation about moving the road. Mr. Orlando asked him several questions.
Ms. Camp?
Mr. Mr. Prince, the
Stalin-
objection's been sustained.
Stalin created a department of misinformation, and they developed a unique concept that had never been used before in the history of the world. They decided that if you said things that were false often enough, that
Objection.
ultimately
Yeah,
they
Mr.
would be
Prince.
believed.
All right,
Mr.
overruled,
You-
move on, please,
You
Mr.
you
Prince.
can
We don't need to
say
hear about
that
Stalin right now.
moving the road doesn't
Mr.
matter.
Prince. Go ahead, next question.
Is there anything on this property, as it sits today, a barren blank canvas, that prevents you from putting the road here?
Objection.
We already-
Asked at least 20 times and answered.
I would agree.
I never showed him a specific location.
It's the same question asked in a different way. Move on.
Is there?
No, there was an objection, and the objection was sustained. Do not ask a question about moving the road. We've already gone through that line.
You will note my objection
We
on the
know,
record.
we know you object
Bar-
to it.
Barring my client from complying with their obligation under the due process clause.
You can take
are
that up on appeal.
depriving- Believe me, ma'am, I will if
Okay.
need be. You don't scare me.
I'm not trying to scare you. I'm saying move on.
Didn't you once upon a time, strike that, didn't you work for Langen?
I did.
And in working for Langen, didn't you initially look at and review with Mr. Heinrich a plan that showed the road running approximately here?
No,
No such plan.
not where you point.
Where was it located before you moved it east?
The road in this section always was where it is.
This section.
Yes. Old plan, which I believe is part of the old record, the road swung out like that.
You don't recall a plan that you drew, that Langen drew, that showed the road running right here?
Nothing to do
Through
with
the
this set of
parking.
plans,
I
Mr.
don't
Prince.
remember that plan. My recollection is what I just told you.
You were asked a question about by Mr. Orlando about the easements. Pardon me. And the maintenance of the easements.
I don't know, that whole line I didn't follow.
You talked about the easement agreement and the maintenance of the easements.
Objection. He says that you were asked a question by Mr. Orlando, and he wasn't allowed to ask it, and now he wants to ask it. Come on, this is a theater of the absurd.
All right, finish. Let me hear it real quick.
You have lines that will run under the proposed road, is that correct? Water and/or sewer and/or stormwater?
Proposed what?
Are there any lines, stormwater, sewer, or water that will run under the proposed road?
Yes.
Is the road proposed for dedication to the township?
I don't know how it.
If you know.
The township owns the land.
You're talking about the piece that is on the Carlino side?
Yes.
I do not know it's a legal matter. I don't know what the
If there's
provisions
notes on
are.
the plan that say that.
And what piping actually runs under that road that would need to be maintained?
Objection as to relevance. If there's pipes under the ground, what does that have any effect on his testimony about waivers and modifications? None. Or ordinance requirements.
Well,
Prince, can you answer that?
I don't have to answer it, ma'am.
Well, you
If
do. You have to provide relevant
if you want to restrict
testimony.
us, if you want to restrict us to only asking questions about waivers that they've
That's
requested,
not what I'm restricting
then
you
say
to.
so.
That's not what
all.
I'm restricting you
I
to.
will obey your order.
Mr. Prince, I'm not restricting you to that. We've already gone down that. What I've asked, though, is that you limit your questions to relevant testimony, which clearly we're allowed to restrict you on under the MPC and the local agency law.
If you
How
look-
is that question relevant to whether this plan meets code requirements? That's the question.
If you look at the referral from the Planning Commission, you will see inter alia references to the maintenance of the piping on the property and the necessity for an easement agreement for the maintenance of the piping. My question is very simple, and I didn't ask it, but what I was getting at is that it just boggles my imagination to think that they're going to maintain roads once you take ownership. Now, if they are, that's fine, but I've seen no evidence to that effect.
But this isn't a question for him. You're making some legal argument based on something that he's,
Asking him about the lines under the road. I was trying to identify what's there. He's the engineer. I didn't
you
ask
went
him
way
about the
beyond asking
agreement.
him about lines under a road. Are there lines under the road? Did you answer the question?
I did.
Okay, so move on. The question's been answered.
What type of lines are under the road?
Objection.
I just want to know, are they sewer, water, or stormwater?
Storm, sanitary sewer.
This is just
That's
to
it.
delay time.
That could be electrical lines based on the requirements of the, the lighting, the powering, the street. So, but those are prepared by PICO at a later date.
You testified about this artificial man-made pond, to use your term. And you said it was necessary to the upstream hydrology coming from LNR. Were you referring to the remainder of the LNR property?
No.
What were you referring to when you said the upstream hydrology?
What I think what you're referring to is when Mr. Orlando asked me if this was a man-made pond and if it could be unman-made, meaning removed. And I told him that, in my opinion, it could be removed. However, the downside is that that pond feeds the wetlands downstream of it. So the pond's upstream of it. I did not mean any reference to LNRPs.
Okay. So the hydrology you're talking about, if you look at the drawing 2102, here is the original pond, correct?
Existing pond,
The
correct?
existing pond, the man-made pond. And right here are the wetlands, is that right?
That is correct.
And this is your outfall proposed?
That is correct.
Stormwater outfall.
That is correct.
In a 100-year storm, would that outfall impact the wetlands?
Objection. Objection. What's it got to do with whether or not our plan complies or not?
He's the engineer.
I think it's a relevant question.
Okay, so rephrase the question, please. I'm not sure if I'm understanding this correctly.
Would you read it back to him, please?
It's gonna be retained here, and it's gonna be,
Doesn't happen until we do it.
I don't know the question is if it's gonna impact it, but it's gonna be.
Yeah, I mean, is it, right.
What is the impact? And if that, we have to come up with some ordinance section that
Right,
says it doesn't
absolutely.
comply.
Can I flip my drawings? I just want to refer to something.
Is there a question?
Well, I guess it's,
Send it back and we're waiting for Mr.
right, but
Thacker to answer.
I would ask that it be relevant to, is there an ordinance section, Mr. Prince, that you're relating it to?
Excuse me.
Yeah.
You overruled the objection. He asked her to read it back. She read it back. We're waiting for the answer.
Okay, and and he can
Mr.
answer
Orlando,
it.
Ms. Camp can ask a question. We are running this hearing, not you guys.
I
She's
just thought,
entitled to a question, and any way we decide we're gonna run this meeting, we're gonna run this meeting. We are being fair and balanced across the board to everybody. trust me when I tell you, everybody's crossed the line today. And gotten we've been very lenient with all of you.
Just again, trying to keep it to the relevant issue is, does it meet a code requirement? So if the question relates to a code requirement, it'd be helpful for him to bring that forth, that's
No.
all.
The answer is no.
So you're satisfied that that outfall, in a 100-year storm or otherwise, given the elevations that you show on 2101, that it will not impact that wetland area?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions.
Does the board have any questions?
That's what I was just
Yeah.
gonna ask you.
Board have any questions for Mr.? Okay.
So as far as, maybe I'm confused, but does our ordinance,
Do you use the microphone?
Yeah.
does our ordinance require a parcel to be self-sustaining with their stormwater? Is
I
that-
can't answer the question. It's
Does
your
our ordinance
questions for
require
this
that?
gentleman.
Self-sustaining to stormwater?
Are we supposed to manage our own stormwater on your own parcel? Within our ordinance? Does a property have to be self-sustained as far as to manage stormwater?
I'm gonna object because I don't know what the term self-sustaining with.
Yes,
regard to-
that's what I'm
Meaning,
confused about.
meaning it can handle its own stormwater?
You always have, stormwater always flows off of your own, off of property.
As far as in what, by natural or by directing it, though?
I don't know what you're getting at, I don't understand the question.
Well, I'm just,
I'm not sure if I understand the word self-sustained. I'm not sure what that means, but
well, I guess
the
maybe,
the ordinance requires you to provide stormwater controls for property that you are developing.
so,
And there are a bunch of items that are called out. Actually, there's a whole ordinance section that you have to design for.
so
So,
our ordinance requires you to develop that property and manage your own stormwater within the different basins and rain gardens and whatnot.
Yes. It requires the stormwater management to be provided for any area of disturbance.
Okay? And does it
If you
have,
don't disturb it, you don't have to worry about it.
sure.
You still have to make sure that you are safely conveying it if it's upstream of you, but you don't have to do the reductions in water qualities and, all of that. So the peak control requirements don't kick in, water quality requirements don't kick in for things that are part of your property but undisturbed, if that makes sense.
So it meets our ordinance by having infiltration basin number one's pipe go over across to the township property and discharge to go to the Beaver Creek watershed off of North Cuddersville Road? Does that meet?
Yes,
Were you
because-
permitted to do that?
Yes, because there's nothing in the ordinance that says that every tax map has to be self-sustained, has to have its own stormwater control, and then by the time the water leaves that tax map area, even though multiple tax map are part of your application, there is nothing in the code that says that you have to design stormwater based on tax maps which are part of the overall plan. The overall plan has to comply, meaning if there are 3 lots, and I'm making a hypothetical statement here, but let's just say there are 3 lots and a residential subdivision is planned. And they're contiguous lots, so the streets run through them, utilities run through them, and just like it is one homogeneous development, the stormwater for that is also expected to be as one homogeneous system, irrespective of where the tax map boundaries were prior to your proposed plan. Meaning you could have one tax map lot, for instance, could be totally open space, no impervious, no nothing, so burden is very less. The other part could be very heavy with whatever, impervious surfaces and drive-bys, etc. But they are all designed as one project. As far as the owners of those lots join in an application. So to answer your question, the pipe that goes on the backside of BVA property and on through the condemned parcel is still, as part of the stormwater design, part of the site. Even
Because
though the tax pack parcels are different.
Because the township's giving
Township
you
owns
consent.
it, correct, exactly. For the same reason that I just gave an example of residential subdivision.
Because I just don't understand, I guess that's a legality thing as far as public purpose. When, I mean, I can see the road, you know, going into a basin down on the L&R property, but not actually designing your system to overflow onto township property. Just seems kind of odd to me.
And
Is
I
that-
think during the original, you weren't here for that, but we did discuss a lot of the roadway carries water, that some of it's getting dumped for the public roadway onto the giant property, some gets dumped onto the BVA property, so there's accountability across the board.
Because I know, I guess, I'm a new supervisor, so I'm just trying to understand things. Obviously, there's been litigation for a long time, so I'm just kind of want to make sure that we, you know, our own ordinances are being upheld. But I do remember that there was a memo that was prepared for the township on behalf of Yerkes way back when, and to prepare a summary of the stormwater control for the proposed giant food store to make sure that the giant can be controlled on its own runoff, and infiltration two can only handle the runoff from the road. And there's a memo on there, and there are some conclusions that much of the parking lot runoff goes through infiltration basin 1 and is directed across the Gambone parcel, which I guess would be L&R or Township now, to a culvert under North Cutleysville Road. The flow to infiltration basin 2 includes runoff from Horseshoe Pike via rain gardens, should the rain gardens overflow, runoff from the southeastern porous pavement area, should the porous pavement overflow, and generally runoff from the connector road. Much of the parking lot runoff goes through the infiltration basin 1 and is
Gonna
directed across the
object.
Gambone
He's reading
parcel.
from a document that he hasn't introduced, that we
I'll
don't have a
give it to you. I
copy
mean,
of,
I'll give it to you. It's just a memo for the
and
township for
relates
stormwater.
to a different application.
I don't know. I don't know what it is, so I don't know what it relates to, if it relates to this
It's a
plan
memo
or
that
not.
we hired our consultant to do, and it says that stormwater from the giant proposed development is, majority of it is running off to the L&R property and not just the road.
It's
And
not
there's-
what that's not what it says.
what
I'm
it
going to
says.
object, Mr. Winters, you haven't introduced the document.
Well,
You're not you're not acting as a supervisor attempting to get information.
Sure I am.
You're acting as an
I want to make sure that, I want to
you're-
make sure that we're
You're
following our own
acting
ordinances.
as an adversary party. That's what you're doing.
How you figure?
You're dragging up material from 3 plans ago, citing it,
It's the same
reading
plan. You
stuff.
said it yourself. You got rid of the bank pad. it's the same calculations. I want to, and my job
Did
as
you
elected officials to make sure that
Did
you
you
follow ordinance.
introduce the entire Yerkes memorandum?
This was it.
No, it wasn't. There's a whole study
Did you
that
have
was
it?
done.
Okay,
The
well,
Is
township,
it relevant? I don't know if that
No,
Yerkes
it's-
study is
it's-
relevant to this plan. We have current reviews
I
from
agree.
Canoni, and LTL had a chance to review it as well. So I think it's fair game to ask him if he believes, as the design engineer, that his plan, but for the waivers that he called out, meet the stormwater code. I think that's what's,
already said that.
right.
all the stormwater from your client site,
What is this? What is this?
Mr. Prince, 3 people aren't talking at the same time. 1 person was speaking.
Okay,
so,
so Ms. Camp was talking, she said that she'll allow him to ask this in his opinion, and I think that's as far as this can go, your opinion.
well, you did the calculations, I believe. So is all the stormwater from Giant, is only the township condemned parcel handling stormwater from the new connector road? Can you be certain on that?
Objection.
I think that's a fair question.
That's a
He
very
can-
fair question.
Look, if you want to get into that, we did this analysis 4 or 5 years ago. That's what
I wasn't
think
here 4 or 5 years ago.
I know, but you're taking a document that talks about Yerkes.
I'm asking him a question about this plan's stormwater.
You're asking him.
It's his opinion.
You're
based-
asking him what is,
Mr. Kaplan, he can ask a question, forget about the Yerkes document.
Yeah, I'm not talking about
Question
Yerkes
is
anymore.
relating just to this
okay.
plan.
I'm not
Okay,
talking
the
about
Yerkes
Yerkes
document's out, we agree that's not part of this. His question is,
what is his question?
My question is does the township condemned property only receive stormwater runoff from the connector road and not your client's proposed development of a shopping center?
Objection as to relevance.
Because
How is that
that's our ordinance,
conceivable?
owner.
That's not your ordinance.
Sure, he just said it was.
Absolutely not your ordinance.
You can't just, I don't understand.
What, you don't understand or you don't want to understand.
I don't understand because he just told me it was.
No, he didn't.
I think, okay, let's take this one step at a time. Shirag, can you answer the question?
So it is not an ordinance, to answer the question. There is, like I said, the property is designed, this 10 acres plus the 2 acres as one site. Stormwater, utilities, roadways, sidewalks, nothing just stops and ends. It's all continuing. It's one holistic development. Just like utilities run through, stormwater runs through, crisscrosses. Portion of the road is on Carlino property, the back part is on the township property, for example.
So I think,
There is a, to answer the question, the storm pipe from Carlino's site, the parent parcel, is flowing, the one that Mr. Prince was asking me a question on, does discharge onto the rear portion of the rear portion of the LNR piece, which is now condemned by the township.
So your answer is no, that the township parcel does not only handle stormwater from the road.
Yes, I said that.
Okay. Handles stormwater from,
Yes, but I will further add,
That's not the basin.
I will further add that that portion of the property which is condemned by the township is the lowest point of the site in general. That's why, hence there is a culvert there. The culvert's there forever, because it is over time, that's where all the water runs off. The stormwater code requires you to put the water where the water is going today. So, meaning the existing drainage pattern is followed.
but don't
That's
you,
where it is going. That's the natural area where water will end up. From this general area, including LNR piece, including Carlino piece.
what about the
all go
BVA?
there.
What about the existing shopping center? Is that run there?
Yes, that is correct. It does run there. Thank you.
Okay.
May I just clarify something, because I think there's a little bit of confusion? You have two storm basins on here, 1 and 2, is that correct?
Yes.
What is stormwater, Basin 1, you've indicated, is designed to handle the stormwater generated from the parking lot on the site, is that correct?
Yes, parking lot from giant building in giant portion of giant parking lot.
Basin 2 is designed to handle what stormwater generated where?
Stormwater generated from the connector road, as well as portion of the property, portion of the parking lot of the giant parking field.
Which portion?
So it drains the front portion, the portion of the front. I'm just gonna try to show you on this plan. This area,
Chirag, I think you have a drawing that shows the drainage basin deeper in your drawing pack.
Let him
No.
answer the question. where he wants to
yeah,
answer.
maybe, I could, it doesn't matter, I can explain if you want. It flows through here into this system of network, goes into this basin, this portion. This side area flows into that inlet, flows down, out into this basin.
And that conforms with our ordinance as far as you understand it?
That is correct.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure it was clear, because when you're asking, there's two different issues here. One is what goes into Stormwater Basin 2, which is on the condemned property, and then what happens to stormwater that comes out of that discharge that's behind the BVA property.
Well, yeah, I wanted to make sure because I know stormwater has been a huge area of conflict as far as legal argument both ways that, you know, I believe with the settlement talks we had said about,
You can't mention anything about settlement talks,
that's right, it's an old plan.
that's not allowed, no, you're not allowed to talk about that as,
Oh, okay. All right. As far as the,
settlement talks.
so it's okay, so it serves both sites. As far as the, so you're, pardon me for a second. Sorry. As far as the, you had said before that the existing plan that you could demonstrate stormwater was handled on your property. Is there calculations for the Alt-1 plan that you had said before?
I didn't say anything about the alt one, I'm not
I'm
sure what you're
sorry,
talking
what
about.
plan are you talking about?
I'm trying to determine if the MPDS permit was approved utilizing the LNR property or just the property that your client owns.
Why do you ask that question after the question that was just asked? Does this plan, the question was just asked, does this plan comply with the township stormwater management ordinance? And he answered yes. And the same plan that was submitted to the township to manage stormwater was submitted to the Conservation District and DEP.
I think Sherrod can answer that.
Okay, so, if you could rephrase the question, I'm
The
sorry.
question is whether or not the NPDS permit relies upon the same stormwater management that you just described, the Basin
Yes.
1 and Basin 2 using both parcels.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
That was the question.
Okay.
But note that the NPDES permit, I forget what the date of approval was, so it's not as of the October 16th set, it is, the previous one, so. But it still has the same, the basins and the explanation that I just provided, it is part of NPDES.
I guess we're going to talk about traffic. I have some questions on the traffic and whatnot and the construction cost estimates, but probably wait until later.
Or, I don't think he did,
No.
I don't think he did that. I think that might be a question for, well, Andy doesn't do it either, actually. Nate would be the one that would review that. I'm not sure we're to that point yet. I'm not sure if opinion and probable cost on any estimate, on any public improvements has been submitted yet, has it, Sherrod?
Not for this plan.
Okay. That's typically done after plan approval, before they would post security. The amount of security gets determined after plan approval typically.
Well, they had to document it on the alternative transportation plan that they're trying to use for PennDOT. They need to have the construction costs.
Yeah, I don't know if he prepared
I
that or
didn't know
not.
if you prepared that or not.
Wait a minute, what's the question?
He's asking about construction
really asking a
costs
question
for
yet.
public improvements, and I said that
We're
this,
certainly not up to that here.
That's what I
Right.
mean. I didn't know it was, that's what,
Yeah.
that's why he asked. He said, is this the right witness? And I said, probably not.
I think I'm all right for right now. I mean,
Okay.
I'm good.
I have no questions, thank you.
All right,
I have a further question of Sherrod. Maybe one, maybe two, no more. Sherrod, you answered a question of mine
Mr. Prince, nobody can hear you. You need to get to the microphone, please. Thank you.
You answered a question of mine earlier by saying that hydrologically.
Mr. Prince, I
Nobody
cannot
can hear you. The court reporter can't take it down.
You said that the water had to flow to the LNR property hydrologically. That is to say that the low point is at the LNR property, and so you had to drain your stormwater there. Is that what you implied?
I said, and I said a lot of things, but I said that, because it's been on for 5 hours now, all this flow is flowing towards this point. This culvert under Guthrie'sville Road is the regional, I want to call it regional, but sub-regional low point. Okay,
But
so
you-
all these parcels want to go there.
But you agree with me, will you not, that there is nothing in any statute, ordinance, regulation of the federal government, state government, or local government that requires, in addressing your stormwater needs on the water's property, that you send it to LNR?
It's a legal matter, I don't know.
I'm asking you about regulations involving stormwater, which you have been opining on for, as you said, 5 hours, among other things. Do you know of any law, statute, or regulation that requires you to send the stormwater from the Waters property to LNR?
Objection, he answered the question already.
I haven't heard the answer, or I wouldn't have asked it.
I would agree, he did answer the question.
And what was the answer?
He said he couldn't opine on that.
He said it could.
You don't know the answer?
I don't have, I
Okay.
don't know the answer to the
Okay.
specific
Okay.
federal statute you're
Then
talking
then
about.
let me rephrase it. I wasn't talking about a specific statute, I was asking you. So let me rephrase it. Do you know any law, regulation, or ordinance that prevents you from pumping your stormwater somewhere else or storing your stormwater on-site subsurface?
You mean on-site subsurface forever?
Nothing's forever.
So
Do you know-
I'm not understanding your question. What does it mean?
Sure, I'm trying to make this a simple question. You know the BVA has a subsurface storage system for their stormwater. That's where the stormwater goes. Whether it stays there forever or not, I don't know. You know, you'd have to ask the man upstairs. I'm asking you, do you know of any law that prevents you from solving your stormwater problem by subsurface storage on the Waters property rather than sending it to LNR?
Objection, it's not relevant. We're here on whether or not we comply with the stormwater management ordinance.
I think it is relevant to say, could you have basically what he's saying is, can you
How is
design it
it-
using
how-
infiltration?
How's
That's
it,
all-
how's it relevant?
Because maybe if he did, it wouldn't need the waivers. Maybe that's where he's going with it. All he has to do is answer the question, can you do it or not?
Don't look at him, you gotta look at me.
Can you do it? Could you do it? You didn't design it that way. Do you know?
And we haven't designed it.
Right.
That's just
I
the
asked
answer.
you if there's any law, ordinance, or section that you're aware of that prevents you from dealing with your stormwater on the Waters property itself.
So this is what I'm trying to get at, which is what I was answering Mr. Winter's question. On your site, this is the site. This 10 acres and 12 acres, I know LTS brought this up in the review
Sharad,
letter.
that's
It
not-
is
No,
it
Paul,
is
let
the
him
site.
answer.
Chirag, that is not the question I asked.
So-
I'm not asking about the NPDES.
Mr. Prince, let him answer, finish his statement, then you can interrupt him at the end.
It is, so there is, the design complies with the stormwater ordinance of this township.
I
Now,
didn't-
I don't know about federal statute or laws or otherwise, but my opinion, as far as I can tell, based on Nate's review letters, which we have gone through 2 or 3 cycles now, we don't see there is any issue with the stormwater design that is material.
Chirag, you're dancing with me. I asked you a simple question. Is there any ordinance of this township, we'll restrict it just to the township ordinances, that prevents you from handling the Waters stormwater of this development on the Waters property subsurface? It's a yes or no.
There is nothing I can add, but
First
Engineering-
answer it, and then you
If
can
let him
explain whatever.
answer Engineering questions.
agree,
as-
Mr.
Madam Secretary, I'm entitled to an answer, and then he can explain it. I'm not
but
going
you
to
don't
You don't
stop
let
him.
him
Go back
answer.
to the
As soon as he tries, you interrupt him.
Engineering questions are not yes and no. Sometimes it needs a little bit more explanation.
But I didn't ask an engineering question. I asked you if you knew of any statute.
Mr. Prince,
I'm an
Mr.
engineer.
Prince, I'm not
prevented
gonna let
you-
you continue to ask questions if you're not gonna let him finish his answers. Let him finish his answer, and then you can state your opinion after.
So there is, let me rephrase this question for my simplicity, maybe we get on the same page. What you are saying is that, is there anything in the code which prohibits us from installing an underground stormwater system?
That's the
On
question.
the Carlino
That's the
property?
sole question.
Okay, there is
It's
nothing.
yes or no.
There is nothing in the code that states that. However, there is a whole lot of best management practices which will say you should not try to do that. That goes as your last resort. I'd like to point to some things.
Sharag, you answered the question.
No, Mr.
Thanks.
Prince,
No,
he's
he didn't.
allowed to expand upon an answer that, a
Okay.
question you
Well,
demanded he
Madam
answer.
Solicitor, he is.
No,
Can-
he's
But
allowed to
he's not
expand.
expanding
Mr.
on the
Prince.
question. He's expanding.
Mr. Prince,
Don't interrupt me.
warning
Do you
one.
mind?
Warning
You can,
one.
you can warn me all you
Warning
want.
one.
Warn all you
Just
want.
stop
If you
it.
want to throw me out on the record, do it.
You're out.
We're done.
Go ahead, Mr. Schrock.
Let the record reflect that
Go
I've
ahead,
been
Mr.
ordered
Schrock.
to leave the premises by Kyle Schreibner, a member of the board, who is depriving my client of due process.
Goodbye, Mr. Prince. Continue to answer the question, and then we're gonna end this today for this.
So, just
And I'll
very quickly.
decide if this continues into your next meeting as well.
Mr. Schreibner, all you're
Continue,
doing
Mr.
is
continue,
indicating your own
continue,
bias and
continue,
prejudice.
continue.
You need to read the record
Please.
back to yourself.
No, I just wanna hear his answer.
Section 350-24 of the preliminary plan, section B 2, B2, 3B. I'm sorry, there's so many subsections to
Understood.
subsections, but I'll get to the point. Which is a part of the four-step design process, which is the one that we were talking about this morning partially. I was explaining as to why it doesn't apply. In that, I'll read it to you, a very small statement in there. It says, preliminary determination of the location for stormwater management facilities also shall be provided and shall be in compliance with the terms of Chapter 345, which is Stormwater Management Ordinance. Such locations shall avoid negative impacts to primary and secondary conservation area and shall consider aesthetic impacts as well as township objective to maximize groundwater infiltration, which is what I was trying to tell Mr. Prince. There's nothing in the code that really prohibits it, but it is against standard engineering practice, against best management practice, and directly it is against the four-step design process, where it is encouraging you to put infiltration basins where you find infiltration rates. Basin number 1 on the back side, we've done a test, and we know that that soil infiltrates.
What about section 345-105C?
345-105C, you said?
Yes. Notwithstanding provisions of this chapter, including exemptions, any landowner or any person engaged in a regulated activity, including but not limited to the alteration or development of land which may affect stormwater runoff characteristics, shall implement such measures as are reasonably necessary to prevent injury to health, safety, or other property.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the exact. 345-305C as in Charlie?
105C.
105C, 345, 105C.
Okay.
And what is the question?
Such measures also include actions as are required to manage the rate, volume, direction, and quality of resulting stormwater runoff in a manner which otherwise adequately protects health, property, and water quality of waters of the Commonwealth.
Mr. Winters, is your question
What's
whether or
the
not
question,
Chirag
though?
thinks it meets that section?
Yeah,
Okay.
does your application meet that section?
Yes, we comply with the rate, volume, direction, quality. It's all the calculations right there.
Okay, can we finish with this witness? Mr. Orlando, do you have any redirect?
Yes.
How long will it take?
Okay.
Okay, because we'd really, I know Mr. Kaplan has to leave at 4.
I've got to leave.
and Mr. Fisher has to leave at 4.
Stop today.
Well,
if
is
you can
Sherrod
finish it-
coming back to the next meeting?
Well, if I could get done.
Yeah, it would be really nice.
5
Quickly,
minutes.
please, you have,
I don't get this. Kristen, I don't get this. Mr. Prince cross-examined the witness, then that gives Gene Orlando more rights to cross-examine the witness. How long does this go on?
We're allowed-
When are they done?
this is
land development
recross,
plan.
Mr. Kaplan. You had the opportunity, if you wanted to do redirect. Recross, he has 2 or 3 questions. We have to be out of here at 4. We don't want Sherrod to have to come back on the next hearing.
Go ahead, Mr.
Okay,
Orlando.
if he comes back.
We don't want him to come back. Please go forward.
Come back either.
Okay.
One question I neglected to ask you was, you mentioned.
Can you speak into the microphone, please?
You mentioned Mr. Klein's review, and I think we were talking about one of the waivers with regard to the plantings. And if my memory is correct, don't want to waste time to a flip for it, but is Mr. Klein B22? I think his report
Yes.
B
is
22, you said?
B22, and I think the number, if I'm remembering correctly, was item 18. I'll try to get to it as quick as I can.
Yes. I have B 22, item number 18 of November 2nd, review letter from
Yeah,
Nate Klein.
that's what I want to ask you. You mentioned a number of plantings that you were proposing.
Yes.
Mr. Klein enumerates in this paragraph on page 4 of his report, item 18, the number of deficiencies. All I want you to do, sir, is would you look at Mr. Klein's report and tell me, do you agree that his itemization of deficiencies is correct?
Yeah, I do. Yes, generally. I get, instead of 144, I get 143, but yes, generally, right.
Within one plant,
Within one tree, yes.
you agree with Mr. Klein's item 18?
Yes, I actually mentioned that that is the interpretation that we want the Board of Supervisors to take.
I understand.
Yes.
My last question, sir, is, this is, I believe, the East Brandywine Township Stormwater Management Ordinance. I'm referring, sir, to section 345-305A. Can you please look at that as quickly as you...
305A?
305, capital A. I think that answers the questions that have been bandied about, but I was wondering if you would take a look at it and tell me whether or not you
Okay, so
would-
what do you want me to, I'm reading 345, 305A, and what's the
Okay, well,
question?
why don't you just read it, because I think that,
Post-construction total runoff volume shall not exceed the pre-development total runoff volume of all storms equal to greater than 2-year, 24-hour duration precipitation, parenthesis, design storm. The water quality, the runoff volume to be managed shall consist of any runoff volume generated by the proposed regulated activity over and above the
She's not
pre-development.
going to be able to take this down. This has been a very long day, and you're rambling through.
I'm sorry.
I know, but, be
I
in her
will-
shoes for a minute.
Mr. Orlando, what exactly is the
What's
question?
the question? He doesn't need to read the ordinance section.
I believe questions were asked as to whether or not the requirement to capture stormwater on site, I believe this section says that that is the requirement, and I was just asking Mr. Thacker to look at it so that he would have an opportunity to explain why it wouldn't apply in this instance. All about testimony that's been asked
That's
and
fine, but
answered.
that's the question. You don't have to read it
That's the
aloud to
question.
answer that
Yeah,
question.
it is, I can just tell you that. It is the question, the section says amongst different things about what storm to design for and how to design for and how the runoff volumes are generated in over regulated activity. And it says you have to treat the stormwater runoff, both in terms of volume and water quality, and permanently retained and infiltrate onto the site. That is the 2-year storm. Our stormwater report addresses this requirement.
Thank you, sir, that's all I have.
Okay, we're gonna adjourn this meeting for today. Let the record show it's 4:03.
Before you have to announce the next one.
And we are hoping to do the next one, Tuesday, the 15th, is it?
January 15th,
January 15th.
9 a.m.
I have a question. I'd like to know who and what Mr. Orlando and Mr. Prince intend to present at that hearing. I'm entitled to know what to prepare for and
Yeah,
what
and I
witnesses.
think we'll have those answers for everybody. We'll have ample time for everybody. Let's just say, within 10 days, everybody has to get their questions into us.
It's a question of who he's going
Who they're
to
gonna
call.
call.
Right. So within the next 10 days, if everybody could get
He'll
that.
communicate that way.
Yep.
So, I'm sorry, Kyle, that
Within 10 days, if everybody could let us know who they intend to call. I mean, we don't want to have 15 people sitting in line if they're not going to get on here.
Well, I would like to know the subject matter of what's going to be presented so
Township.
that I have
Right.
the right witness.
So I guess what we'll do is we'll have our solicitor communicate a letter within 10 days, and then that will give everybody time to have that, the plan of attack, so to speak.
Well, I want to understand something. The materials that Kristen sent out that I thought we agreed to was that you were putting in the record all of the reviews and all of the comments from LTL and our responses. And there were supposed to be no new issues that we don't know about. And what I'm seeing here is, we're going back to where we were a year ago, and it
Well, that's what I
was
said earlier. Everybody's going to get a little bit of leeway, but with retrospect to what happened at the end of the meeting, we're not doing this next time. I'll end the meeting before we even get started if it continues that direction. We will allow a very, very slim amount of leniency towards this, but we're not going to continue to just dwell up the past.
But I think we always said that any party has the right to cross-examine the author of some of these documents.
Yeah,
We've always
I-
said that.
So,
So, and they had the ability to cross-examine on the waiver request. To the extent it went beyond that, we tried to stop that.
All right, so do I
That's really
have-
what it was supposed to be about.
Norm Ulrich's report is in the record.
Right, understood. And
I'm
our
gonna
intention,
I'm going to object if they're going to put Norm Ulrich on the stand. That's not the rules that you set.
That's not the rule.
But have
We're
that
not
in
gonna
your,
read-
have that in your letters of response when Ms. Camp's office sends it out the next 10 days. Do I have a motion to
Mr.
adjourn?
Orlando will
Moved.
All in favor?
Aye.